and we will begin doing some warm-up cuts. Okay. All right. So, do we have everyone? Feel free if feel free if you'd rather do Messer. You can do these single-handed or two-handed. We can actually we'll do sets of both. So why not? All right. So into the high vom talk, we are going to cut Oberhau to Einhorn. Und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay, back up to the high vom talk. We're going to cut Oberhau to long point. Und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. All right, to Alber. Eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay. Keep our right foot forward into the high from the high vom talk. We're going to cut right Oberhau. 40 und los. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Switch your feet. Left Oberhau to Alber. Und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay, so from vom talk, we're going to cut left Oberhau, transition, and then cut Unterhau. Okay. Eins und zwei und drei und vier und fünf und sechs und sieben und acht und neun und 10. Und okay, switch your feet. Right Oberhau, left Unterhau. 1 und 2 und 3 und 4 und 5 und 6 und 7 und 8 und 9 und 10 und okay. We're going to begin the right ox, and then we're going to cut Oberhau. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. From the neighborhood, on the right-hand side, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to cut Oberhau. Und 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, we're going to add another little one in here, and it's going to be from the right side, just because it's going to fit into a little bit of what we're talking about. I want everyone to do is start in Vomtag, and then what I'm going to ask you to do is, but when you're going into Vomtag, I want your left foot forward, and then what I would like you to do is hang as if in a hanging parry, while taking a step forward with the right foot and striking Oberhau. So we're going to start here with our left foot forward. And we're going to take just a little bit of a step as we hang and right Oberhau. All right, so let's do 10 of these. All right. 1 und 2 und 3 und 4 und 5 und 6 und 7 und 8 und 9 und 10 und. Okay, we did the neighborhood already. All right, so let's switch sides. I'll get into more. I wanted to kind of get that into the practice. I'll talk a little more about that later. But let's move to ox on the left-hand side. And then from here, we are going to step and do an Oberhau. Okay. Und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. All right, into the neighborhood. Oberhau would step if you got the space. Und eins, zwei, drei, vier, fünf, sechs, sieben, acht, neun, 10. Okay, we're going to do a similar thing on our left side. We begin in Vomtag with our right foot forward. What I want to do is step into the hanging, kind of an inside hanging here. So from sideways. All right, and then from here, left Oberhau. Okay, so we go from here, hang, cut. Here, hang, cut. And again, for this hanging, our hands are going to be going from this Vomtag position to this. Okay. So inside line, your hands could be hanging back. All right, let's do 10 of these. So from this Vomtag with your right foot forward, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and good. Okay, now let's do some thrusts. So in the flug on the right hand side, we're going to thrust with a step if we have space into the left ox. Okay. Und eins und zwei und drei und vier und 5 und 6 und 7 und 8 und 9 und 10 und all right. Let's actually from this same side. We're going to still begin with our left foot forward, right foot back in that right flug, and we're going to step forward with our left foot, and go into right ox from the right flug. Okay? 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, let's switch sides. Let's get into that left flug, and we're going to thrust into right ox. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. Now from the left flug, let's go into left ox. Okay. Did everyone else just get the curfew alert? My phone just blew up. Yeah. All right. From left flug to left ox. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. All right, let's do long point right down the middle. All right. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Good. All right, everyone grab quick water. It is warm today. It's humid. I wish it had rained a little harder. Okay. Oh. All right. Let's see. Trying to remember exactly. Like last week, we went over a kind of a drill for kind of like drill set 1. I want to kind of review it a little bit with a little bit of a modification. I ran it past a teacher of mine, and they want me to kind of change a little piece of it, which is fine, right? And the only piece that is a little changing. So real quick to review, what we were doing last week is kind of practicing this kind of, I don't want to say kata, but this kind of longsword form for just kind of good practice, right? Not quite Molinet, but something that you can work your way up into using as a paired practice. And so what we had done as the feeder, we were learning the feeder roll, which involved cutting the first cut, which is right overhow, and then warding with a hanging, and stepping forward with a right overhow. Now this is what we did last week. Is what we did. We returned to a low hanging. This is, to be clear, this is perfectly fine. This is a valid parry for the anticipated strike that would be coming in. In this case, it would be cut number 4, which is a left Unterhau from your opponent's view. That would be on your side. This. One of the things they recommended was changing it to an Alber parry, right? So meaning you would cut this Oberhau, and it's kind of like as if you were in Flug and dropped the tip to Alber, if that makes sense, right? And that is that's really good for warding low coming strike, like an Unterhaus strike. This does work. It just doesn't always end up being, especially if you're low. It's just I was told it's usually faster to just do this, right, and then cut right Oberhau. So the full course of actions after you've come into it, you go to the high Vomtag to strike right Oberhau. You step backwards into a hanging. You strike right Oberhau again. Parry low, strike right Oberhau. Right? And what this has done is it's been a nice, helpful. It's also a way to kind of remember there are 3 parries, like really good parries on to defend yourself on the right side. Okay, and that is Vomtag, and that's like this is still kind of technically Vomtag. So you're parrying and say a Vomtag. It gets a little hairy, and so I'm hesitant to like use the certain terms because we know like this is Vomtag and this is Vomtag. So there's like this kind of parry where your sword's generally in Vomtag, or even you could kind of consider it in Flug, but then, oh, is this Ox or is this Einhorn? I don't want to get too confusing, but there's like the parries are like this really high, this, right? These are good because they're strong defensive parries that allow you to set up for doing another action. And especially here, you can start, once the swords kind of come into a bind, especially in the high ones, you can choose whether or not you want to oppose or yield in a bind. So that's what, so this drill is generally teaching a few good parries with a riposte of Oberhau. So let's go over this again, real quick.
Could you walk through the new lower parry to the Oberhau again? I'm not sure about wrists.
Sure. I'm also going to lower the camera too because I'm sure it's been a little difficult to see. Let me see if I can get more light.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll skip right to that second parry. So we've cut right Oberhau. And now the easiest way to think of this next Alber parry is so you take that step backwards because you always want to have whatever side is being offended. In my opinion, you want that foot backwards. And so after you've taken this, boom, right? And the idea being you want this generally close to your body because you want to be able to catch their blade on your strong as much as you can. And so the best way I found to describe this particular parry is if you go into Flug on your right-hand side and you just drop the tip, right? Drop the tip to Alber. So it's almost this kind of hanging Flug, or this right side Alber, so to speak. And that ends up being a really, really good parry on this side. And then from here, you would uncross your hands and strike Oberhau with a step. Yeah. And one thing, because this was actually brought up to me when I was demoing this with some other students, a lot of these are not necessarily intended to be, this particular first set of drills is not intended to be, oh, the fastest way to get my sword into the other person. but it's the safest way of getting the sword into the other person, right? Because from here, yes, you're taking your sword back. You're kind of moving your sword, your blade back, but in doing so, part of the reason I really emphasize the uncrossing of the arm, this uncrossing of the arms, is because once you've parried the sword here, you flung their sword and then you're cutting in. Right? And that's again why it's really important to try to parry with the strong of your sword as much as you can, because then you can ausstrichen, kind of fling them away, and then come back in. So let's go over this whole piece again. We'll start in our resting position. We'll salute into our first position. To scabbards. To long point. Vomtag. Right overhow. Parry. Strike right overhow. Parry. Strike right overhow. Yeah, good. Looks good. Let's do that one more time from the first position. All right. Scabbards. Long point. Vomtag. Overhow. Parry your head. Strike right overhow. Guard and unterhow against unterhow. Strike right overhow. Back to long point. Good. All right. So that is that half of the first piece. So I just wanted to run through that because again, that was like a little correction I was given. And so let's go through the player part of this, just so you can kind of see both sides. And then what I'm actually going to try to do is I'm going to try to play a little Zoom game. I haven't tried doing these yet, but what I'd like to try to do for the next couple of weeks is go through the different cuts, like the overhow, unterhow, right, left, and then have y'all demonstrate one of the wards that would work against that. But that's coming up next. Let's do the player role on this drill. Let's take it from the first position. Scabbards into the long point. And so, as you can see from the previous feeder position, just tilt this up so you're not staring at my belly button there. So the first thing that's cut is the right over. The feeder cuts a right overhow. So therefore, I'm going to step backwards and guard my head. And then I am going to strike left overhow. And I'm going to, and the next strike, they return, the feeder returned a right overhow. So I have to guard my left side. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to cut an unterhow on my left side. I'll go back to first position, long point, and then first position. All right, so those are the basic actions. Let's do that again. First position, scabbards, long point, parry that overhow, strike left overhow, parry that overhow, strike that unterhow, long point, first position. Good. All right. And so once we kind of have the opportunity to have people in a group again, these will make more sense. And I've been, I can start posting videos. Some of us have been going to the park, and Dina, Kat, and Josh are going to be helping me taking photos and some videos of stuff, and that'll all get posted and shared around. But these are really good little drills to do because they slowly kind of teach, again, warding to specific stimulus, right? And that's kind of, and that was what I wanted to kind of get into for the rest of today, because one of the questions that I get asked most often, especially when we're kind of going through the technique section of the material, is, well, what do I do when blank happens? Or how do I know what to use and when to use it? And I think like a good way to start is kind of bringing it back, going back to kind of like some of the very, very basic stuff. So what, let me see if it will let me share my screen real quick. It is not, okay. Well, it doesn't look like it's gonna let, sorry, my internet's like a little wonky today. So I apologize for that. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to run through the basic cuts real quick, and we'll talk a little bit about the warding or the parries or wardings that are involved. So the first thing that we're going to do is right overhow. Real basic, right? Simple. HEMA 101, right? But right overhow. So if I'm striking right overhow, which side do you have to defend? Left side. Right. Correct. The left side. So there are three ways to defend this, and it all kind of, again, against the right overhow, and it all kind of depends on the clearly the height of the incoming strike. The first one is simply a nice strong flug position, right? Boom. And part of one of the things I like to try to do personally, and this is something that I do because I like the kind of strength that I get from the parry, is making, again, always trying to parry with the strong of my sword and turning that flug, kind of punching out. Leanne knows this from Corey's silver class, where you're punching out a little bit. And part of that is because you don't want to end up here. As much as this is like a nice idea, like, oh, I can just go thrust this person, you want to make sure to punch out a little bit, because you don't want their sword sliding down in a way that then is going to hit your hands. Yes, you have a cross guard and a shield, but that's only going to help so much, right? And again, in this case, my left foot is backwards. And that can come because either I've stepped forward with my right foot, or maybe I've stepped backwards with my left foot. People who've taken my Messer class know my personal reasoning behind this. It's because whenever a strike is coming from a particular side, you want to try to put your leverage into that side. Now, it can get kind of funky when the person's kind of fainting, but then that's when better judgment and you have to control distance a little differently. That aside, so overhow, defense against right overhow. A similar version of this is also very, very high overhead parry, this. And the reason, so probably this, or I've seen people also do this. Seems to work pretty well, but it's not quite an overhead parry. It's more of an Einhorn. Works very well, like this. And that's if you have a very, very high strike coming in, like a higher overhow to defend the head. It's really, in many ways, it's just kind of like a really, really high flug or ox kind of tipped in the Vomtag. And what's nice about this, again, it sets you up to either work hard or weaken the bind. And the third, parry, the hanging parry, right? So those are the kind of three defenses against the right overhow. And then, of course, depending on the vertical nature of the overhow, if it's real straight down, you can just do this. But I'm really mostly talking about that 45-degree-ish strike. And now, if we take a look at the left side, very similar. Bam. Because if the person is striking left overhow, they're attacking your right side. So, boop. So again, same kind of thing. Flug with that little punching motion. Hanging. or simply this, or just again, like a nice high, like a high tipped ox. And there's a reason this comes up, and it's because part of it is that a lot of times people try to simply Absetzen in without making sure that the sword is actually safe. Absetzen is a really great technique if you can do it with enough leverage, and especially myself as a small fighter have a very hard time against taller fighters because there's always going to be that kind of that little bit extra they're getting out of every swing, that kind of like a little round, right? So especially if I'm going in for an Absetzen, what I'll do is parry, and then in that same moment, that index moment when I start punching away the sword, then I start dipping the tip, right? Yeah. So anyway, long story short, sorry, I'm in like tangent mode today. It's been a long week. So against left Oberhau, I am then attacking your right side. So you have to defend, or defend, right? And let's see. So for now, let's see. I think that should be because it's the most because there's 2 strikes there. Let's try to play a little Zoom game. Keep all of it very simple. So I'm going to either strike right Oberhau or left Oberhau. I'm gonna do it slowly at first, and I just want you to do basic parries based on that incoming strike. Okay? This feels so silly, and I love it. I'm just gonna say that right now. Okay, so I'm going to begin here, and you may begin in any guard you wish, but use the proper parries. Right Oberhau. Left Oberhau. Right Oberhau. Really high right Oberhau. Good. Really high left Oberhau. Left. Right. Right, faking the go left. Right Oberhau. Left. Right down the middle. Yeah, there we go. All right. This is silly, but great. I love it. I think that works okay. So let's talk about Unterhau. So basic words for Unterhau are pretty simple. If someone is striking right Unterhau, where they are striking your left side, so simply, kind of like what we were just doing in that drill, but on the left side. The best way I can describe, again, the best way I can kind of describe this posture, or this parry, this ward, is if you are in Flug, and you drop that tip to Alber on that side, right? And you can do this either low, if they're swinging for the legs, aside from just getting out of the way, you can do this. Or if they're kind of aiming for this area, you can still do this. And what's nice is by kind of thinking that, I heard a question.
Could you just drop the camera a little bit?
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. So here, the best way to describe it is Flug and then kind of dropped, right? And that also, so that's kind of helping you defend your legs, not just with distance, but if you need to put a piece of steel there as well. But you can also do that higher. Because sometimes people aim, that Unterhau is aimed kind of like for the soft bits here. This, right? Same thing on the other side. Just a nice low, like tip drop, Flug to Alber kind of drop. Or if you need to raise that backhand, this is good. And especially if it's coming higher, what's nice too is if you rotate on the front of your foot into this position, still kind of dropping that tip. What you've done is you've kind of given yourself, again, that you're putting your whole body into that parry. So then you can do other things, or here to here, or whatever you need to do. Bam. So these are kind of the like active use of like these postures, right? Of the Violega. So if I'm striking left Unterhau, guard your right side. If I'm striking right Unterhau, guard your left side. All right, we'll make it real simple. Same game as before. All right. Left Unterhau. Right Unterhau. Right. Left. High left Unterhau. High right Unterhau. Low left Unterhau. Low right Unterhau. All right, let's mix it up a little bit more. I'm going to add the Oberhaus into it as well as the Unterhaus. All right. Left Oberhaus. Left over. Right Unter. Right Oberhau. Left Unterhau. Right Unterhau. Left Unterhau. Right Oberhau. Left Oberhau. Right fake left Oberhau. Left fake right Oberhau. Left Unterhau. Right Unterhau. Left Unterhau. Left Oberhau. Good. All right. So yeah, so that's a basic, just like a little basic module for kind of improving basic wards, basic Versetzen, basic displacements. We got just about 10 minutes left. So I just wanted to, what I want to do next week is I'm going to go over the second drill set. I'm kind of delaying some of that just because I'm hoping to get out. I want to film more of it and be able to show you what it looks like with 2 people, just because I think it's going to make it easier to kind of ingest. What also I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about is bind work. And I know that's going to be kind of hard to discuss it virtually like this, but I'm going to do my best to kind of find a way to both like describe the concept and find a way that we can do something here. One of the ways that interesting way that it was kind of described to me, a way of thinking about Fulin is kind of when you're in a bind, you're going to do one of 3 things. You're either going to yield in that bind, you're going to oppose the bind, or you're going to circle around the bind, okay? And I like that kind of, because it's a very concise way of looking at how to respond to something. And so maybe we can think of like a little game or some very similar thing to at least in our brains kind of figure out a virtual, like some type of like virtual back and forth on that. Does anyone have any like HEMA related question stuff or anything that they want to practice since we're all kind of here? I do realize we forgot to do Mittelhau in our warm-up cuts. That's my fault. I apologize. So if people, we can finish off the warm-up cuts correctly if people want to. Does everyone have room for Mittelhau? Okay, let's do it. I'm loving how every week people have different implements to do this with. It's we need like a little Katie's got a hammer this time. No skillet how this week. We need like a little hall of fame of items. Okay. All right, let's do metal how. Okay, from left to the right, and then back for the first 5. Let me fix this because now it just looks awkward. Okay. And 1 und 2 und 3 und 4 und 5 und. Okay, switch over to the right side, and now we'll go right to left and then back. 6 und 7 und 8 und 9 und 10 und. Yay, we did it. All right. Well, if folks don't have any questions or any requests, I would say take the next 20 minutes to a half hour and practice doing the basic cuts again. Like do the whole warm-up routine again. That way, just give yourself time to practice. Or if you're working on something specific, let me know. I'll be in the Discord. I'm going to be setting up the movie night thing if you want any tips for like any specific practice thing. Otherwise, thank you for class, everybody. I know it's been a really long week. I hope everyone's been staying safe and doing what they need to do. And yeah, I'll be in the Discord if anyone has any questions, comments, or concerns, okay? All right, I'll see y'all later.